I think if there's one problem the United States has right now, it is militant ignorance. 9/11 happened because we weren't creative enough. What America represents is the greatest force for good. If you are reading on a Kindle, you are retaining less information.
Our guest today has spent his career exploring the threats that most of us hope never to face and the moral threat carried by those who stand in the way. Brad Thor is the author behind the Scott Harvest series, novels shaped by real-world research, hard conversations, and a deep concern for the cost of protecting a free society.
Whenever I get asked what our biggest national security threat is, I really do believe it's social media. The Chinese think 100 years ahead. We think to the next election cycle. Courage is holding out 1 second longer than fear. If I could wave a magic wand, I would get rid of the internet.
I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Our guest today has spent his career exploring the threats that most of us hope never to face and the moral threat carried by those who stand in the way. Brad Thor is the author behind the Scott Harvest series, novels shaped by real-world research, hard conversations, and a deep concern for the cost of protecting a free society. His work wrestles with courage, consequence, faith, and family. Brad, we're excited to talk with you today.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Were you always a storyteller? If so, what part of the young Brad is still in there helping write the stories?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, I think the thing that I always was a reader. I don't think you can even get close to being a halfway decent writer without being a voracious reader. So I always read and grew up in Chicago. And my parents, we lived in a rented apartment. And my parents, the first real estate they ever owned was they bought a summer cottage up in Wisconsin on a lake called Lake Geneva. And they had this big, beautiful screened-in porch, and they always had guests up and everything. There was a big basket of paperback and hardcover books. And so it was almost like the household lending library, but for adults. It was not intended for children. And I had burned through all the Hardy Boys books, and my parents loved thrillers. So they loved Clancy, they loved Freddie Forsyth, they loved Robert Ludlum, Trevanian, all those kinds of authors. And so I realized I could sneak books from lower down in the basket that they hadn't paid attention to in a while, and I could read them. And I started reading them, and I loved them. It probably was way too young for some of the material in there. But that created my love of writing, was being a reader. And then I would start writing. In grade school, I started writing short stories and things like that. And I've always had a very active imagination, which I think is important for any creative person, whether you're a painter, a writer, an attorney who's presenting their case at trial. So that piece of me, that voracious reader that I was as a child, never left. And the storyteller, the person with the great imagination, has also stuck around as well. So that child inside of me is still very rooted in who I am as an author. It's actually a really good question. I've never been asked that before. So that was kind of fun to answer.
It's really funny because my dad, when I was growing up, people used to, and still do, people will say like, I want to be an author. What should I do? What should I do? And his number one suggestion always is read. If you want to be a good writer, you need to read. And then the other funny thing is his book, I don't know if you saw, my dad smirked and chuckled a little bit when you said Hardy Boys. That's like that was my dad's book of choice too. He loved those growing up.
We had them. We had a stack of them on the bookshelf, and I could even remember the books. The spines were kind of blue, and they had a little oval with the drawing of the two Hardy Boys in the oval and everything. Yeah, that was it was nice growing up with books. I in fact was just interviewed by someone who they're in the middle of a snowstorm now in Ohio, and he talked about making the kids put away their screens for a little bit and read books while they were trapped inside with the snow. And I pointed out to him that we as adults have been sold a little bit of a lie about how do we get our children to be great readers. And we were always told that you have to read to your children. That's incredibly important. But in the book Freakonomics, they looked into it, and what they found is the greatest determinant of whether your children will be great readers is, do you have adult books scattered throughout the house, and do your children see you reading? And that is the greatest thing you can do for your children, is to model the behavior of someone who enjoys reading.
I'm really interested in this as a parent, so I don't want to go too far off path, but I want to ask, what makes, when you say a great, quote unquote, great reader, is that just somebody who reads a lot?
Somebody who reads for pleasure. Obviously, we have a lot of demands. I would say demands on our time, but we have a lot of opportunities to entertain ourselves. And reading takes self-discipline. So if you look at scrolling on Instagram, you get a lot of very quick dopamine hits. You don't get that with reading. But there's a lot of other positive things with reading that you get. One of the greatest things you get from being a reader is empathy. It actually increases your capacity for empathy by visiting storylines via different characters. So there's a lot of good moral and cultural things that happen when you have a society who reads. That reads.
I'm getting suspicious that my dad tipped you off before, but that's exactly what he says too. So I'm wondering if he sent you talking points before we recorded here.
Well, it's funny. I think when you are someone who's kind of tuned in to the world around you and you have things you care about, where it starts with your family, it goes to your neighborhood, it goes to your community, it goes to your country, and it spreads outward from there. I think there's a lot of things that we share in common because we realize that there are very solid building blocks to creating a great family, a great neighborhood, a great community, great town, great city, great country, and all on the way out from there. It's funny. I have a question at some point. I want to ask your dad if he'd ever met Doug Buffone. I don't know in his history if he ever came across Buffone at all, but I remember, so Doug played for the Chicago Bears, and his son was at my grade school growing up. And I remember Mr. Buffone being a big reader too. I thought it was fun when I would go over to the Buffone's house that here's this incredible football player for the Chicago Bears, yet there were tons of books around the house. There were history books, there was fiction, and I always thought, wow, here's somebody who's just famous for being an athlete, yet he loves to read. And I thought that's really cool that you can be in a physical career like that, yet he constantly is obviously feeding his body with nutrition and exercise and everything, but feeding his brain with books. And it was just yet another box ticked for me that made me enjoy reading even more.
Yeah, it looks like they probably he retired in 1980, so it looks like they probably just missed each other. But
I was wondering if there was kind of sometimes you don't know if you ever come across somebody who drops into coaching for a little bit or whatever, or kind of works the circuit in speaking. And I never know. Sometimes the world is really small, sometimes not small at all.
Totally selfishly, again, one more question about this study, then I'm going to have to go read it myself. But did it matter if it was a Kindle versus a paperback book or anything like that, or it was all the same?
So I will give you the knock against Kindle books. So as far as your children being good readers by seeing you model the behavior, physical books around the house was important. I did not see it measured as to whether or not you were reading a book versus a Kindle. If I had to guess, it would be better to see you reading a book, because that's your kids from a very young age are going to have access to children's books. You're not going to give your child a Kindle right away. I will tell you, one of the most interesting studies I ever saw was that if you are reading on a Kindle, you are retaining less information because it's perfect. The way the type appears on the page is perfect. If you go with a printed book, there are actually little weird things that happen with the ink. There are words or letters that are not lined up. And that bumping in your brain actually helps you better retain information. So if you're looking to have a deeper, more fulfilling reading experience, you should be reading ink on paper.
I'm debating this with my wife right now. She uses the Kindle and I use paperback, so there we go.
Well, now you can tell her
I'm
that.
gonna clip this one. I'm just gonna clip this one part. I don't care. The rest of the podcast, I don't care. You just won me an argument.
All right, so great. I get to sow some discord in your family. That's terrific.
Yeah.
At some point, storytelling becomes something more than imagination. Your novels often feel less like imagination and more like anticipation. At any point, did you realize that fiction could almost function as a warning system?
That's a great question. Yes. So, one of the most flattering blurbs I ever received was from Dan Brown, writer of The Da Vinci Code. Secret of Secrets is his newest book. And Dan said Brad Thor's novels are as current as tomorrow's headlines. So a lot of things that I have written about have happened in one way or another. And I remember a couple of years ago, I set the opening of a novel at Burning Man and a particular style of attack that evil doers wanted to do at Burning Man. And it actually caught the attention of the Department of Homeland Security, who launched a whole security review of Burning Man, that this had not been considered, I guess, that such an attack could be carried out there. When Burning Man is going in the Nevada desert, it's as tightly packed as Metro London is the way it's described per capita. So yes. So I write these things. I'm a voracious consumer, not only of books, but of news. So I'm constantly reading newspapers, watching things on TV, saying, what if this happened? Or what if what we're hearing on TV is not the full story? It's only 75% of the story. So first and foremost, my job is to entertain people. But if they close a Brad Thor book a little bit smarter, their eyes a little bit open, a little bit wider, asking a few more questions, if I've done that, then I've done my job as an American, I think. So job number one, entertainer. Like toes in the sand, book in the hand. I want you to have a great time reading the book. But then, like I said, if you close it smarter with a few questions you want to dive into yourself, I think that's the icing on the cake.
You've spent years talking to people who live close to danger. What is the most misunderstood trait of those who actually protect us?
I'm glad you used the word protect. So I always say that there is no American dream without those willing to protect it. I enjoy a level of security, comfort, and opportunity that has never been known to mankind before in history. I really do believe that we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. I have a friend named Jonah Goldberg. Jonah appears on CNN sometimes. He used to be at the Weekly Standard. He has a media company called The Dispatch. And I blurbed a book for Jonah. In Jonah's book, it was a really interesting title. It was called Suicide of the West. And he chose that title because he said, we are like standing on the top of a very pointy mountain. And if we lean left, we lean right, we lean forward, we lean backwards, we're going to fall off the mountain. And the only thing that can upset the great prosperity we have is to commit political suicide, cultural suicide, economic suicide, that kind of a thing. And in Jonah's book, he said that if you were a soul in heaven, and you were told you were going to be born, and we can't tell you anything about your life, but you do get to pick a time and a place to be born. That's all we can guarantee is the time and the place. You won't know what your gender will be, what your health will be, any of that kind of stuff, what your bank account will be, none of that. And if you were given that choice, you would choose the United States right here, right now. There is no better place and no better time in history to be alive than right here, right now. So I look at the people who protect us, and I think they sacrifice so much. My dad is a no longer active United States Marine. The Marine Corps was his ticket out of the south side of Chicago, and he went to college on the GI Bill. And I think the people who protect us, particularly the ones who do some of this nation's most dangerous business, very far away from home in the shadows, those people give so much to this country. There's a very high toll on relationships, marriages in particular. There are children whose mothers have to go away for a while or fathers have to go away for a while. And by the way, I have to apologize because my family jokes that there should be a 12-step program for me. Like Al-Anon, it would be called On and On and On. And sometimes I can go so long in an answer that I get so far away from the question. And I've now realized I've drifted so far away. Can you repeat it for me just one more time to make sure I hit it?
No, you hit it. It was about if it's like sometimes your fiction can feel almost like a warning. You know, something you just said that there's this great Warren Buffett. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like, so not a quote. I'll paraphrase. Basically, he said, if you could put every human was like a marble, right? And they put them all in a big jar, and you could reach in and pull a random one out, but you had to switch places with that person. Would you pull a marble out? And if the answer is no, then you probably have a pretty good life. And if you live in if you just live in the United States, to your point, you definitely should not grab a marble.
I think that's fantastic. And it's very similar to something that I once heard that I've kept very, very close to my heart. And I try to keep it in my conscious mind as much as possible, which is we are all given at least one cross to bear in life. Sometimes that cross is obvious to other people. Sometimes it's not obvious to other people. And if you walked into a room and you laid your cross down on the table, with, let's say, 100 other random people, the odds are very likely that you would want to walk out of the room with the same cross that you walked in with, that you wouldn't be switching that cross with someone else. Because I think what that means is that you have learned how your cross is significant for you and you are used to relating to it in living your life with it. But I'd never heard that Buffett example with the marbles. I think that's fantastic. You wouldn't want to pick one. If you live in the United States, you would be like, nope, not picking a marble. All good.
Yeah, it's from his, I'll send it to you after this. I'll send you the link to it. But it's so good. And he says it so much more articulate than I do.
He's also the one that says it's when the tide goes out that you realize who's not wearing a bathing suit, which is a financial thing he says, I guess, about people and their positions in the market and stuff. He's a bright guy. He's got some good phrases, I guess, sayings. Yeah.
Yeah, little quips that like you always remember him and Munger.
Yeah, and Munger too. Oh gosh, Charlie Munger. Yep.
In your novels, you push that tension further. Scott Harvath operates in moral gray zones. What line will you never let him cross, and why?
That's a great question. Yes. So Harvath does operate in moral gray zones. The idea with what Scott Harvath does is, so if I come to both of you and I say, here's a contract that you're selling me your house for $5 and I've signed it and we're all good. But you didn't sign it. Is that contract binding? And that is a moral question that a lot of people have had with the Geneva and Hague Conventions. Are our enemies entitled to the protections of the Geneva and Hague Conventions, even if they do not abide by those themselves? And our answer as the United States has always been yes. We will abide by the terms of Geneva Hague, even with people who are not signers of the Geneva and Hague Convention. Because those rules exist largely to protect civilians and then to protect our own soldiers should they ever be taken as prisoners of war. So Harvath, the idea behind Harvath and what he does is how do we level the playing field with people who don't have a rule book? They don't even, subscribe to Marquess of Queensberry rules. And so the idea behind Harvath was that the United States government was going to set him loose without any of those prohibitions, let's say. But you could not send a sadist out to do that. You could not say, okay, no rules. We're going to look the other way. You go do what you need to do to keep America and Americans safe. You would need to send someone who had an incredibly strong moral compass, who wouldn't break the rules just for the joy of breaking the rules or the joy of seeing others suffer. You'd need somebody who would only break the rules if it was absolutely necessary, but then when he broke them hard. And he did it just as the situation demanded and only for as long as it demanded. So that is the moral gray zone that Harvath works in. And I think a lot of us, particularly post 9/11, when Harvath first hit the scene, I think a lot of my readers really hoped that there were people out there like Scott Harvath who were willing to kind of skirt around some things and to kind of skip through the bureaucracy and stuff to actually get to a readily identifiable bad guy who intended to hurt innocent people, and that that we had whole battalions of Harvaths out there was the hope. So yeah, that is the way Harvath operates. He doesn't break the rules for the sake of breaking them. Does it only when is necessary. And I think he's a great character for a book because you get to witness a lot of his internal dialogue and how he feels about doing those things and why he does them. And I think it makes those moments when he does break the rules very exciting and very satisfying, because it isn't just, like I said, he's not a sadist. He's not doing it just to cause a bad person pain.
Something you just said triggered my memory. That my dad's last question was, is there a misunderstood trait in the people who actually protect us?
That's what it was. Yes. Yeah. Is there a misunderstood trait? Thank you. In the people that protect us. Gosh, is there I've spent over 2 decades with so many of these people trying to get to know them and understand them and understand what motivates them. Is there a misunderstood trait? It's funny because in the circle I travel with, which is a lot of police officers, a lot of military people in diplomatic corps, they understand the nature of the work. That's a tough question, because I don't have any misunderstandings, but it is more of a kind of culture writ large. Is there a misunderstood trait? Right off the top of my head, this is a great interview because you're hitting me with questions I've never been asked before. So I don't have like ready answers for you. You've got me thinking. Nothing comes to mind because they're all individuals. They're all different. I think there's understood traits. I think people don't appreciate or understand well enough the sacrifices that these people make, the dangerous assignments they take. And I think probably one of the biggest things is I think there's not enough people that understand the debt we owe these people. I'm particularly serious about them coming back and being able to get great health care from the VA. I think that's a really, really important thing for those who need it. And just as a little offshoot of healthcare, what is very interesting is to have watched over the last 15, 20 years, how particularly in the special operations community, the SEALs, Delta Force, things like that, the operators are being treated more like professional athletes now, which is very, very interesting in that a lot of repetitive motion injuries, knee problems, back problems, things like that you would see in football players, hockey players, basketball, baseball players. They're realizing that a lot of things we've learned in sports medicine can be transferred over to take care of the special operations guys. So anyway, I've got a whole thing about healthcare for vets and all that kind of stuff. But if a trait before the end of this interview pops up that I could think of that's grossly misunderstood, I will shoot it back at you. But yeah, and that may be why my brain ran off in a different direction and didn't fully answer that question for you. So I'll keep trying to think of something, but nothing jumps to mind.
You might have hit it in your first. You said that they're all individuals. They're all different. I think that might be the most. I'm not nearly as close or intimate as you are, but it seems like anytime one bad thing happens, people make mistakes in every profession. But anytime someone who's supposed to protect us or whatever makes a mistake, it's so easy to forget that they're people just like us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to attend an FBI and Major City Police Chiefs conference every year. And there was a fascinating booth there that was a virtual shooting booth. And so what it was set up to do was to put law enforcement officers in situations where they had to decide shoot, don't shoot. This is a big thing that a lot of agencies do with media personalities. And it's a great idea because you're training the media to understand how quickly those who protect us have to make life and death decisions. And I remember one particular scenario, and you were not allowed to watch anybody else go through the scenario before before you, because then you would know how it ended up and what it was. And I remember playing the role of a state trooper that pulls up someplace in kind of a forested area, and there is a tent there by the water, and you can see that the man inside has a shotgun. And he is not responding to calls to come out, not responding. And then you as the state trooper, because it leads you, it's like watching a movie, but your POV of the state trooper reaches down, picks up a rock and throws it at the tent. And the guy comes out with his shotgun and whips around. And you have to decide, shoot, don't shoot. And I didn't shoot. And I was one of the only people that didn't shoot. And they asked me, they said, you got it right. Why? And I said, well, my wife does American Sign Language. She's worked with hearing impaired hockey. How do I know the guy's not deaf? And they went, oh my God, in this scenario, that man was deaf. He was a duck hunter. He was deaf, and he could not hear the police officer. And I was like, wow, that is great, not only for training law enforcement officers, but what a great thing to be able to show somebody from TV or some other news organization. You know, they probably would have shot him in that situation. And what kind of a story would you write about an officer who mistakenly shot someone who didn't hear the command? So anyway, it is fascinating. I think we take a lot for granted. I think if there's one problem the United States has right now, it is militant ignorance. People who not only don't know enough, but are proud and very full of energy about the fact that they don't know enough. We could all do, myself included, could do very well by taking a deep breath and keeping our minds like a parachute. It has to be open to work. And I think we're seeing a lot of people jump out of planes with their parachutes not fully open.
Drawing that line requires something internal. What's one of the truest things you've learned about courage? Not the most dramatic version, but the kind that shows up quietly when no one is watching.
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably one of the most interesting things I've learned about courage. There's an old saying about courage, and courage is holding out 1 second longer than fear. And I thought that was fantastic, that everyone experiences fear. I mean, from the biggest badass in Delta Force or the Navy SEALs or Marine Recon, some of the bravest people, they all experience fear. We all experience fear. And so courage, for me, the idea that stoicism is not perfect, but I'm a big fan of stoicism. The fact that we have the ability to look at a situation and determine how we're going to react to it. And one of the most interesting things that I've picked up recently is situation doesn't have to have a value judgment from you. You don't have to say this is good or this is bad. It can just be. So courage, I never realized that courage was such a mental issue, and that's probably one of the most subtle things that I've learned, that having courage is actually a choice. It isn't you're born courageous. We're all born fearful. We're fearful that our parents won't love us, that we won't get enough to eat, that we may lose our job. We spend a lot of time. Thomas Jefferson once said that you should take life by the smooth handle. Which is a really, really good piece of advice. And Jefferson also said that 99% of what we worry about never happens. So the idea of holding out for that extra second, to just take a beat, take a breath, see if you can push through, that being courage, it's so simple. And I think that's probably one of the most interesting things I've learned about courage, that being courageous actually is a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah, I never heard that about, it's so true though. 99% of the things you worry about never happen.
Right? Isn't it true? The amount of time we spend in our lives worrying, we can't sleep at night because what if, and then it never happens. And so you have a choice to say, okay, if this thing happens, then I'll deal with it when it happens. And that, I'm 56 now, and I'm still learning these lessons of courage and stoicism and patience and virtue. My kids joke with me. They say when you hit middle age, there are two things every American man, every dad is allowed to do. You have to make a choice. You can either smoke meats or get into World War II history. Those are your two choices when you hit middle age. And I love World War II history. I'm not much of a guy who smokes meats, but Stoicism, I was starting to get into Stoicism before COVID. And then when COVID hit, I said, okay, all right, I'm going to get a daily chance to practice Stoicism. This is a new craft, and whether I like it or not, I'm going to be presented with opportunities every day to hone it. And then COVID passed. And guess what? Every day there are still opportunities to hone my my Stoicism. So it's a nice philosophy. Again, not perfect, doesn't cover everything, but it has definitely been something that I've enjoyed, particularly when it comes to courage. It's one of the handful of things that I really look to it for.
Courage can steady a person. Institutions are harder to steady. You write about institutional failure as much as external threat. When did you first realize how fragile these seemingly too big to fail systems can be?
Our house, when I was growing up, big fan of Ronald Reagan. And Reagan was not a big fan of institutions. I will say this, and that's a great question. We're going through, like the last 10 years, we're going through an interesting phase that we saw kick off Italy with Berlusconi, kind of the rise of populism. And there is a very big populist political movement in the United States now, and populism ebbs and flows. We had the Know Nothing Party, not because they didn't know anything, but we had the Know Nothings in the 1800s, and that was a populist movement. And the reason they were called the Know Nothings is because when anybody asked them about their movement, I don't know anything about that. So it wasn't that they were ignorant, that was their response about that particular movement. So populism comes and goes in the United States. It's kind of I'm going to say recessive gene. And what's interesting is that part of populism is a distrust in experts and a distrust of institutions. So when I write about institutions in my thrillers, it's set in DC. It tends to be Congress and the different intelligence organizations. So it is born of the time that I spend with people from the CIA, the DIA, other places where they're stymied by the rules that are put on them, where certain things don't make sense. Congress has got Title 10, Title 50 dollars, which we're not going to bore the audience and glaze their eyes over. But there are certain things when, if you spend the money on stuff, a perfect example is $1 bucket of money. If you develop intelligence with it, you can't use it to kill people. It's a weird thing. If the money was developed under, and I always mix it up, whether it was Title 10 or Title 50, you can't move it over. You can't move the intelligence over in a certain way that's used to use a drone strike and stuff. So my thing about institutions was they often can't keep up with the threats because they are so big. In fact, we see with Congress has a hard time keeping up with technology, coming up with rules for social media, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. There's now a big fight in DC over AI. And what should AI be allowed to do? Should we heavily regulate AI? Should we not? Where does the First Amendment come into social media? Is there a line? Are things like Facebook and X, are these like public utilities? Because everybody depends on them now to get out. So it's fascinating. So when I write about institutions and institutional failure, it's largely from the point of view of operatives who can't get stuff done. So they step outside either their chain of command or outside of their regulated and accepted system and cut corners and sometimes break the rules to get to the end goal. Again, I think there's a certain amount of wish fulfillment there that we hope that, heaven forbid, there was something barreling down on us that if, I was going to make the joke about a few eggs being broken to make the omelet, that we'd be okay with breaking a few of the rules. But the rules also exist to keep us true to what we believe in as a country, that we're a moral country. We want to be that shining city on the hill. We don't pull out people's fingernails. We don't put their children in front of firing squads to get them to reveal information, things like that. So at the same time that my characters deal with issues with their own institutions, I also try to balance that with us being that shining city on the hill. That the reason we have rules, we have regulation, we have oversight is because we want to stay true to who we are and our belief in what America stands for.
That awareness carries weight. How do you carry the weight of knowing things about threats and vulnerabilities and the human capacity for violence without letting it harden your heart?
I will tell you, I actually make it harder on myself than maybe I should, because I buy a lot of pitchers of beer and I buy a lot of steak dinners, and then I ask one, you may call it stupid. It's good for my book, but it's not good for what you just asked me in that question. I ask people who are out there who face the worst things in the world, what keeps you up at night? What are we not guarding against well enough? What do you think is coming? And granted, there's only so much that the people I spend time with can tell me. I don't have a top secret clearance. Even if I did, that doesn't give me the right to put that in any of my books. My books would have to go before a review panel if I had a top secret clearance. So I hear a lot of stuff from the men and women I spend time with that keep them up at night. My heart does not get hardened because I know the people that are out there trying to prevent these things from happening. I know what good people these are. I know these people not only in their capacity as warriors, I know them also in their capacity as family people, as moms and dads and sisters, husbands, brothers, sons, daughters. And they give me hope. They give me an incredible amount of hope because they are so you would think a lot of them would be jaded, but there is such an optimistic viewpoint on so many of them. There are those who are frustrated. There was a CIA knock, so he didn't have official cover. He wasn't operating out of an embassy, and he wrote a great book called The Human Factor, and he wrote under the name Ishmael Jones, and he would talk about his frustration as a CIA operative in the field, where he would send memos back to Langley asking to be able to recruit certain people or to conduct certain operations, and there was such a fear of okaying him to do these assignments that instead of just saying no, they would send his memo back and critique it for the comma placement. So commas were in the wrong place, and they would send it back edited instead of giving him an answer on, go do this, don't do this. And they would be in arrears with him on money he would need to give to his informants and things like that, and he'd have to come out of his own pocket. But even with all the frustration of somebody like that, I saw the optimism that America, with all the hard work it had to do to keep itself safe, that if we continued to represent freedom, democracy, the power of the individual, that would have an outsized impact to whatever the Navy SEALs could do, Delta Force could do. Eventually, the bad guys would get defeated from within their own populations. There's a reason that Putin invaded Ukraine, and it was because this democratizing, westernizing nation on his doorstep told the rest of the Russians that life could be better, that everything Putin was telling them was a lie because things were getting better in Ukraine. And what was the difference? They weren't getting this nonsense from the Kremlin on down. The Ukrainians realized that if they faced America versus faced Russia, their lives were going to get better. So at the end of the day, one of the best things we can do as a nation to improve our own security, but also security, stability, and prosperity around the world is to cling tighter to what makes us good, to support each other and to double down on what makes America that shining city on the hill. So that's what stops my heart from hardening, is I know that what America represents is the greatest force for good. It's greater than any bomb we can drop. It's greater, like I said, than any SEAL team we can put out there. That America and the idea, and we fall short. We're not perfect. We're human beings, but we get up, we try harder, we go forward with what works. And that to me is what keeps my heart from hardening.
Have you ever held back from publishing something because the truth was too close to real people or ongoing operations?
Yes. So I've got a group of what I call my sharpshooters, people who are active and retired military, intelligence, law enforcement, people in the diplomatic corps, people in the Department of Justice. So I've got my key group of people that I share the manuscript with. And every time I work with somebody on a book where, granted, I write fiction, excuse me, but I do have experts who I reach out to, like, what would you do here? What would you do there? Blah, 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 blah. And so I always make sure that I haven't revealed anything or that they told me something in error that shouldn't be in the book. And it's funny because I have had it happen where I've shared my book with my experts and they will say, okay, I remember I told you point A and I told you point B. Or no, I told you A and I told you C, but B has got to come out of the book. And I'm like, but you didn't tell me B. And they say, B has to come out of the book. And I'd say, oh, I guessed right. I figured out what B is. And they would just repeat, B's got to come out of the book. And in which case I pull it out because I'm an American first and foremost. I'm also a business person. So number one, as an American citizen, I wouldn't want anything in one of my books that gave something away and put our men and women in harm's way. That would be number one. Number two, why would you poison your own well, right? If I didn't respect that request to remove something, change something in the book, I'd never have access to that expert again. And it's a very small community. Word would spread and I would be persona non grata. It's just not the way I roll. I'm creative enough to come up with something else. So, but yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I've changed stuff in the books before because I was either too close to something or directly, I believe, nailed something. It was just told, can you change that?
Clarity changes you, but there's often a cost to seeing clearly. What has clarity about the world cost you personally?
Boy, that's a great question because one of the things that I do fight against is I don't want to ever become jaded, right? I talk to a lot of people about very bad things that happen at home and happen around the world. As an author, I'm a big believer in free speech. And I want everybody to have free speech. And there's a lot of people around the world who don't. And what bothers me, and I hope I'm still within kind of the friendly confines of your question, one of the things that bothers me is that when we in this country avoid difficult conversations and try to hide it under a blanket of it would be culturally disrespectful to the people in this nation to discuss X, or people who live in this nation that subscribe to some of those views, particularly, I had a lot of things, particularly in the aftermath of 9/11, that I was concerned about, and I remain concerned about when it comes to Islamism, not Islam as a religion, but the hardcore fundamental tenets of Islam. I have a real hard time with the treatment of people who are not Muslim in the Muslim world, how women are treated, how gay people are treated, and so on and so forth. So one of the things as an author who believes in free speech, we have free speech in this country, and I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So one of the things that gets to me is when I see bad things happening in other countries, when it is because of an ideology, and we shrink from discussing the ideology honestly here at home and fairly. You can't paint anything with one big brush, but we get shut down so quickly on just even addressing the truth in this country, where we are the freest people when it comes to being able to speak in the world. So that's a thing that gets to me, is that I think we could actually be helping people in other countries. I said earlier, we help by our example, by what we represent, by the heights that free people can get to. But I also think we lose an opportunity to give a helping hand to people in other countries when we refuse to discuss certain topics. I think we can help move the ball down the field a little bit by being honest and respectfully discussing certain topics that a lot of people are uncomfortable with and we avoid. I think that's to our detriment that we don't do that.
Where do you think, like, what forum do you think that you could have those conversations now today? It seems like with kind of clickbait and that stuff, it seems like it'd be really like near impossible to do that.
Yeah, so I caught a clip on social media, and I'm going to space. I think it might have been a Bill Maher clip, and one of his guests said, and this was so I saw it on YouTube, and it was like a quick grab. When it's the rectangle like this, I know it's going to be like a less than a minute video, and I'm like, okay, let me click on this. And the guest said, we are divided in America because we are being purposely divided. Algorithms are, when I get asked about what I think our greatest national security risk is, I always say social media. People are so siloed in America because of social media. So they are hearing from people. Facebook groups are a perfect example. I know you are a little young. You're probably not in Facebook groups. You may not even be on Facebook. But what ends up happening, I've got family members who are on Facebook, and they get in these groups where everybody thinks the way they do. So what ends up happening is when you're in a Facebook group with people who all hold the same ideas that you do, you drop your guard down because you believe everybody thinks like you. And so those particular areas where you're surrounded by groupthink, when you're siloed, that's one of the places that the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, and the Iranians love to put disinformation into, because your guard is down, because anybody in that group, you think they are trustworthy merely because they are expressing the same views that you do. And that's where you're most vulnerable. So this idea that we are not divided because of our differences, but because we are specifically being divided, that's what scares me, that algorithms are feeding you what you want to see, hear, and believe. So as opposed to when you used to have ABC, NBC, CBS, we're all getting different information now. So if you're on MS Now versus Fox or Newsmax or whatever, you can get information 24/7 that makes you feel good and that reaffirms your priors, that just supports what you believe in. You don't get challenged. And in the way you get this information, it hardens your heart to a certain degree, whether you're left, right, it doesn't matter. But it erodes your ability to have that parachute, your mind open, and to be open to the idea that maybe there's something I can learn from the other side. I might not agree with everybody on that other side, but maybe I'm a little rigid here. Maybe I don't have it 100% correct. Maybe I'm 80% and it's worth looking at that 20%. So yeah, that's whenever I get asked what our biggest national security threat is, I really do believe it's social media. I always say that if I could wave a magic wand, I would get rid of the internet. As much as this is so convenient to do this, if I had one wish, a genie in a bottle, I would get rid of the internet and make sure it never came back. I think that'd be the greatest thing that could happen to our civilization.
What do you think, like realistically, obviously, that's never going to happen, right? But if you have like, I don't know if you saw Australia did like the social media ban,
For the
maybe
kids.
it was a couple months ago, like 12 years
recent.
old and younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you be supportive of stuff like that?
Yeah, I would. We were talking about institutions earlier, and I talked about the failure of institutions to meet threats. One of the biggest threats that our institutions fail to meet quickly enough is Congress dealing with technology and being able to legislate. They are always behind the curve. And this is one of the reasons that the tech people pump so much money into DC, is because they want to forestall anything that curtails what they're putting out. That's one of the reasons that they do that. So I think what Australia did, we'll have to see how healthy that is. I just know with my own detox, when I can put I had a very minor surgery where I had to recuperate for like 48 hours. And I just told everybody I'm not going to be available. And I actually turned my phone off for 48 hours. I can't remember. It's been years since I've had short of a Boy Scout camp out. That was the longest I'd ever been without contact with my phone and feeling like I needed to check text messages and emails and what's in the news and all that kind of stuff. So listen, we have had such an explosion of anxiety and depression in our young people in this country. And I have joked that one day we're going to wake up and there's going to be a study that says that my generation, having had our breakfast cooked for us on nonstick pans and being sent to school with sandwiches in Ziploc bags, plastic Ziploc bags, that we somehow ingested things that got into our DNA that we passed to our kids. And so it's kind of it's a joke, not a joke kind of a thing about why there's such an explosion of anxiety and depression. I don't think you can look at just how it's ramped up as kids have gotten phones, the birth of social media. I find it hard to believe that there isn't some sort of a connection there, that social media isn't driving these bad outcomes for kids. It has just exploded. So I don't see other than social. So this is what's good about what Australia did, right? I think most parents would love not to. We agonized over giving our kids phones at young ages. What's great about, in my opinion, and I know very little about the full program in Australia, so don't at me, folks that are listening and watching this. Don't at me. I think what you do is you alleviate the guilt of parents if it's a blanket thing. So parents don't have to provide their children with phones by a certain age, because kids that don't get the phones are ostracized. They're bullied. Your parents are poor. They can't afford the phone, all this kind of stuff. I don't know about you when you were growing up, but your dad and I, certainly when we were growing up, if we had a beef with anybody at school, if, we were getting bullied, whatever, that kind of crap ended at the schoolyard gate. That ended for the day when you went home. You might not feel good about what happened and all that kind of stuff, but it ended. We also went home and rode our bikes until the streetlights came on. The joke that we drank out of the hoses and all that kind of stuff. But we really did get out and experience life. We weren't sitting there doing this all the time. So I have yet to see anything that says it would be a detriment to take phones and social media away from kids. I've only heard the potential positives for it. Nobody is standing up, banging pots and pans saying, oh my God, we are going to destroy kids if we take these away. So I'm willing to roll the dice on this, because I think it's a move in the right direction, but we need to study it. We need to study it. But not anything. I'm against the whole, if it saves just one life, excuse for anything that people want to do. I believe in making moves slowly. I believe we move forward in life. We move our civilization. We move our culture forward. I'm just not for headlong rushes into things. I'm for, let's move slowly. Let's pay attention to the consequences. Let's measure this. Let's see what happens. But let's keep ourselves moving forward with wide eyes and intelligent minds, studying what each step costs us and what the benefits are that we receive from each step.
I would love to have it, and this is the opposite of moving slowly. I would love it if it got shut down, or if at the very least, I think, and this is kind of the whole DC thing, like the algorithm is programmed intentionally to inflame people, right, and get them.
Yes.
But it's like, what if you took that part out?
Yeah.
Like, I don't mind. I just having a discussion with somebody in my family about this. Like, I don't mind targeted ads. I don't want to see ads for things I'm never going to use. I don't mind seeing something like, oh, that's actually useful. Yeah, I could use that. But what I don't want is, targeted, whatever, news clippings or things like that.
And that's the thing. So the way the media system works now is, if they can, pardon my French, I won't use a bad word. If they can make you angry, you will stay on their site longer. You will click more of their stories, and you will share more of their content. So anger is what drives media now. And as the internet has grown up and we have all these different spaces where people can have podcasts and things like this, it's fractured. So now what drives media companies, whether it be a small podcast all the way up to, a bigger organization, is holding on to their audience. So you have audience capture, where all of a sudden the people who own that platform or own that program feel that if they don't give their audience what they want, the audience is going to go someplace else because there's so many choices. So it's like being a drug dealer. So you can't keep giving them the same kind of drug, that you have to purify and give them a stronger and stronger hit all the time. And like I said, anger is the best way to hold on to people. So the incentive structure to make money is to make people angry. And that is the problem. So I agree with you on the algorithm and all that kind of stuff. Once they can figure out kind of where you are on the political spectrum, they're not going to be trying to get you in with, oh, isn't this a nice way? Look at these two groups that work together. They're going to be like, this is the way you see the world. We're going to make you angry and make you feel like you're under threat. And by clicking this, we're either going to make you feel better about your position, or we're going to make you kind of revel in the tears of people you don't like. And here's a story about them getting hurt. And that's a bad incentive structure for our media.
Stripping away any politics, in your research, what have you learned about evil that most people would rather not face?
It's funny how often evil people don't see themselves as evil, which is very, very interesting. They see themselves as the heroes of their own story, right? They believe they are acting in the best interest of their ideology, their country, so on, so forth. I think that makes for the most interesting depiction of bad guys or of evil in novels is to actually be able to see how the bad guy sees himself or the bad woman sees herself. What motivates them? Why are they doing those things? But probably one of the most common things I see as far as what we would agree is evil is most often used for people to either achieve or maintain power. That's what's interesting. So you see governments that, like the Assad regime and the terrible things they did. They did it because the horrific things they did was to preserve their grip on power. You see this with the mullahs in Iran. You see this with the horrors committed in North Korea. The terrible things that the Russians do. This is all about keeping power. And so that for me is probably the most common, most typical form of evil that I see. And then the people that have made a conscious choice to prop up that regime or go to work for that regime, who perpetrate evil in the name of that regime because that gets them power, that gets them the things that they want.
How do you personally define justice when the law cannot always reach the truth?
So I'm a little bit with my books because I do think it's there's a certain level of satisfaction, and I'd be pilloried if I left if I left justice unserved by the last page of the book. So I'm a big kind of Coda Hammurabi guy with my books, in that if you've got a bad guy who has perpetrated evil in the books, Harvath's going to get him by the end. And that person is going to, Harvath is kind of this extrajudicial force where, for whatever reason, if the bad guy couldn't be brought to justice, Harvath brings justice to him or to her. I made one exception to this, which I got to the end of, and I'm looking off camera because I have all my books on my credenza over there. I got to the end of my book called Near Dark. And in Near Dark, Scott Harvath has had he went and he had killed a very bad guy who happened to be the son of the fictional Russian president in my book. And so the Godfather, who is a big oligarch, put out the world's most expensive killing contract in history, $100 million on Harvath. And so Harvath's has to work his way up a chain and get everybody involved in this contract and kill him. And he gets to the Godfather, the good friend of the Russian president, the godfather of the kid, not a kid, he was a man, the son of the Russian president. And Harvath goes to get the guy, and the guy's wife has got cancer. And they live in the south of France, and he's able, the only time this guy's guard is down is when his wife is going to see her oncologist, and he goes up and the bodyguards stay outside of like in the waiting room of the clinic. It's the only place Harvath can get this guy. And Harvath goes in to get him and to finish everything up and to kill this guy. And the wife begs Harvath not to do it. And she says to Harvath, he's a son of a you-know-what. I think he's terrible. I think he deserves to be killed. But he's the father of my children, and I have young children. And I think my children will have a better life if he lives, and he has to atone for his sins. And Harvath thinks about it, and it was very interesting from a moral perspective. And she goes, and I will not take no for an answer on this. I know where he hid the $100 million for the contract. I'll give you half. You get 50 million. I get the other 50 million. And Harvath says, okay, I'll do this deal because you asked me to. If he ever raises a hand against you or your children, I want to know about it. And then he will disappear and you'll never see him again. And the wife says, deal. So that was one of the only times, and it was because somebody interceded on behalf of the evil person to make a moral case for please don't kill him. The only time a bad guy had somebody stick up for him, as bad as he was. So that's kind of how I handle justice when justice can't be served kind of in a court or in another means.
You've written about enemies who are patient, adaptive, and ideologically driven. What worries you most about complacency here at home?
Oh my God, what a great question. So one of the things that worries me the most is that the Chinese think 100 years ahead. We think to the next election cycle. We think 2 years ahead. Then we get the midterms coming up. Then we've got the next general election. I worry that we do not think far enough ahead. All you need to do is look at the fact that we only have 2 functioning icebreakers in the U.S. fleet. Okay, and one of them is used for the most part to resupply our research stations down in Antarctica. That is a big failure of imagination. After 9/11, when the Department of Homeland Security was stood up, I got asked to be part of something called the Analytic Red Cell Unit. And the idea was to brainstorm what future terrorist attacks might look like at home and abroad, and to discuss where might the United States be falling down on the job. Because the US government realized that the reason Al-Qaeda was successful is because of a failure of imagination on our part. So when we talk about ideologically driven enemies, whether that be the Chinese Communist Party, whether it be the Iranian mullahs, I do worry that in certain parts of how we assess the danger, we are not thinking steps ahead. That said, the Analytic Red Cell Unit, I thought, was a brilliant idea. I thought it was incredible that the U.S. government said 9/11 happened because we weren't creative enough. So let's bring creative people from outside the government into D.C. to help us think outside the box. So our thinking in election cycles, I think, is one of the worst things that we do. And I think it reflects the tribalism and the loyalty to party versus loyalty to country, that we don't have enough. Reagan, I'll come back to Reagan. The old story was Reagan and Tip O'Neill used to sit down and have drinks together, and they used to work things out. I don't necessarily know that we have people who are, we don't have those kinds of strong bipartisan relationships. And I think the inability of our leadership, of our elected leaders, to come together and work together as Americans versus as members of separate parties, I think that probably is one of the greatest dangers as we try to mount defenses against enemies that are patient and are ideologically driven. Great question.
When you were on that, whatever, in that group or committee and things like that, was it just kind of open forum, people brainstorming things that could go wrong, or was it more specific than that?
So when you get a bunch of creative people together and you're trying to solve a problem, it's like herding cats. You guys have seen just today with just one creative, with me, and I'm going off in different directions and I'm forgetting what the question was to begin with. I was really impressed with how they kept us straight in line to answer certain questions. So we were never allowed to talk about what happened in there, except they publicized one scenario. Okay. And I'll tell you the kinds of thinking we were asked to do. But the one scenario that they published, that the Red Cell Unit did, was they examined a potential terrorist attack during a hurricane and leading right up to a hurricane. Because what happens with hurricanes is people go to a shelter, right? If people can't stay in their homes, they get moved into a shelter. We also have marshaling yards for equipment. So a lot of the equipment you'll need right in the aftermath of a hurricane gets moved out of the path of a hurricane. And could those marshaling yards be struck? Could the shelters be struck? So on and so forth. So what you had happen in the Analytic Red Cell program was you'd have free-for-alls, like, what do you think could be a big attack? In fact, I came up with an attack scenario in there, and that attack scenario didn't happen in the United States. It actually happened someplace else in the world. And I woke up one morning and saw it all over the news. And I reached out to the people that ran the Analytic Red Cell Unit, and I said, listen, I'm going on TV to talk about this. Can I say that we actually brainstormed this in the Red Cell Unit? And they said, no, we don't talk about anything. And I always jokingly referred to Red Cell as the Las Vegas of government programs. What happens in the Red Cell stays in the Red Cell. But, you get things like, okay, if you had this thing, and this thing, like if you found this cell phone SIM card in Jakarta and the same credit card, debit card that was used to pay for it bought these Air Jordans in Tunisia, and we know that this guy bought a ticket on this ferry boat in the Philippines, what kind of a scenario with just those three things would you cook up? So it was a lot of free form stuff. It was a lot of, if you wanted to get to this particular industry, how might you do it? So it was tons of different questions. It was actually fascinating and really gave me a lot of faith in our government. I thought it was the most forward thinking, most aggressive federal program I've ever seen. And as an American taxpayer, it is the second program I am the proudest of. The first being where the Blue Angels will take certain people on a 45-minute ride in a F-18, and I got to do that. So the amount of fuel we burned, I was working through my tax returns, thinking about how much money it would take me to pay for that amount of fuel. So my favorite was the ride with the Blue Angels. Second, the Red Cell unit.
All of that is heavy. Where do you go mentally or spiritually when the darkness of the material starts to press in?
First to my family, second to comedy. So I love stand-up. I love well-written comedy shows. So I go for love and I go for laughter. So when that darkness does press in, when I'm concerned, number one, I turn off the news. That's a big thing. That's a big thing. It's never ending. It is okay to take a vacation from current events. It doesn't make you a bad citizen to turn off the news for a while. Turn it off for a day, turn it off for a week, turn it off for a month. I went away for a month this year and rented a place to begin working on my novel. And I walked in, and it was funny. I was like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. I was going to be there for a month all by myself, and I walked in. The owner met me there, got me in, showed me how everything worked. Here's the days garbage gets picked up, so on and so forth. And I said, thank you. I took the keys. Owner left, and I looked around and I went, there's no television set here. And then, like Kevin, I went, there's no TV set here. Like, I was so excited. And I had a month without television, and it was, I could get on the internet if I chose to. But I didn't choose to that much. And it was a month without TV, and it was fantastic because normally I would just have the TV running in the background. I'd have, CNBC or Bloomberg on in the morning when I was making breakfast and coffee and the stock markets and all that kind of stuff. There's just no TV. So the love of my family, laughter with comedy, and then taking a break from the world because it is just constant. I can remember, and I'll jump off my soapbox. I can remember when cable news stations, it used to be a really big breaking news story where you would hear that chime and then the alert would come up, breaking news. That was a big deal to get your attention. It happens 30 times an hour now. Everything's breaking news, right? It's ridiculous. So this constant drumbeat that creates so much anxiety that everything's breaking news and everything's unprecedented and all this kind of stuff. Like I said, I took a month off this fall and it was absolutely delightful. It was rejuvenating. I came back feeling, lighter and happier and more optimistic about the world and about life.
Do you have to detox like that every so often, or just if you feel like it?
You know what? I do. It is good. I used to go to Greece a lot, and I need to get back. And no TV there either. So I like to go. That's kind of my thing now. No TV, because I do think it's healthy. I don't do it enough. I don't detox enough, and I'm growing more comfortable. More secure in the fact that I can unplug, that I'm not going to, I used to be a talking head. I used to be on TV all the time talking about politics and geopolitics, domestic politics. And I felt like I needed to not miss a thing. I couldn't miss a single fight in Congress or a thing that somebody tweeted or whatever, because I get asked about it. And I was terrified of being on TV, being asked of something and not having an intelligent answer. I don't do that stuff anymore. So I'm actually, and that's been a good thing. It's great to be on TV and sell books, right? I mean, that's terrific. But it was a heavy weight to carry to feel like I had to be on top of all that stuff. And it's a relief not to, I'm still plugged in. I can still talk basically on any subject, but it feels good not to have to watch it second by second. Can you imagine having a permanent seat in the Roman Colosseum and having to watch all that blood be spilled day in, day out around the, no thanks. No thanks. You can still be a good citizen and unplug and detox.
You have mentioned strength and discipline. Let's talk about what undergirds it. Faith is something most people get nervous talking about, especially in a public setting. I'm the opposite now. I feel like I have to tell anyone who will listen because of how much of an impact following God has made on my life. I've read some of the things you've said before about faith. Where has your faith been tested most severely, and how has it changed the way you approach issues?
I think close family members with health issues has been one of those areas where my faith has been tested, but it's also been reinforced because I didn't go into adversity without faith. It is. I think it's easy to have faith when times are good, when things are good. It's easy to take things for granted when times are good. I think that's just the way we are, the way we're built, that we do that. So there's been some health issues with family members. I lost my mom during COVID, which was difficult. Not being able to spend as much time with her because she was in an assisted living facility, and not till the very end did they say, okay, you can come spend time with your mom now because she doesn't have much time left. So that was rough. My faith right now is being tested in what I'm seeing in some of my close friends, my fellow countrymen and women. I am concerned with what I see people excusing because it makes them pleased politically. So there's a lot going on that just concerns me. People are making decisions. They're commenting on certain things in a certain way that I never would have guessed they would comment. That they would put kind of tribalism and politics before their own humanity and humanity of the people they care about. So I've been through some of the tough health stuff in the family, and that's not necessarily fully behind us, but manageable. And but I'm in this new space of being tested where I have friends that have convinced them. I've lost a lot of friends. Let's put it that way. I've lost a lot of friends, and it's been over things that I think should people that I looked up to as being leaders, people that were very, very outspoken about their faith and what they stood for. And then when they were tested, they fell. And their inability to stand fast and to trust in their own faith and to use that to help them make difficult decisions, they chose the easy way out. And what really has scared me is how many other people use that one particular leader, and I'm not talking about Trump or anything like that. I'm talking about somebody different in my life. But how many people use that person's example, where that person faltered and fell, to willingly walk away from faith and not do the right thing. So that's where my faith has been tested. And, everybody's got to walk their own path, and you hope that they learn. I have been very, what's the word? I'm the author, but what's the word? Disenfranchised, disappointed. I've been very disappointed in watching people who I thought had a good core, were rooted in their faith, not do the right thing. And that's, I'm not talking about politics, but I am seeing things that they've taken the temporary scratch of their political itch and they've put that ahead of everything else. And even down to, that's again, on and on and on, right? That 12-step program that should be created for me. But yeah, that's the area. That's the area.
Has writing ever strengthened your faith, or has it more often challenged it? In your line of writing, I could see both.
I think it has strengthened it and it has challenged it. Morality is something I deal with in every single book. So, I mean, in one sense, there's a lot of what happens in my books that is me having a discussion with myself about morality and doing the right thing and doing the right thing at all costs. We joke internally in my office that Harvath is the ultimate Boy Scout, that he does the right thing no matter what the cost is. And Harvath has this Navy SEAL maxim that he lives by, which is failure's not an option. Success is the only option. That you succeed at the mission, and there's no failure. It's not an option. So every book I write, there is this wrestling with what is the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do, and how, in pursuit of doing the right thing, what's allowed, what's allowed. So yes, so both things happen when I write the books, and they are, they're a 350 page, 400 page self-discussion in many spots about morality, about faith, about doing the right thing, and what does it mean for an individual, and what does it mean for a nation? And that's subtext too. I mean, I write action thrillers. That's the subtext. Anybody who's not read a Brad Thor book before, I don't want you to think that that's what the books boil down to. But I do appreciate that you're calling that out as a facet of the books, because that definitely exists. Definitely exists, because I like to examine what does it mean to be American, what are our values as a country, and how do those interact with this very dark world where there aren't a lot of rules. Often there's no rules involved when Harbath goes out to do these missions.
When readers tell you your books help them feel seen or understood, how does that make you feel?
I love that. I actually love that when that happens. I particularly like it when it comes from people in the military, people in law enforcement, that they say, you know what, you got it right. That's exactly what I'm dealing with at work. Thank you. And one of the other neat things is people who write to me, young people, and say, I signed up for the military because the things I learned in your books I really liked. I looked deeper, and I decided you led me to this new career of mine in the military because I read your books, or I decided to go to work at the FBI or the CIA or whatever it might be. And I always love that. The idea that I had something in my brain and I put it on paper and it impacted somebody's life, and they felt motivated or they felt understood, is a neat thing. It's an incredible power. The connection that you have as a writer with readers, it's just like you plug from here into that reader right in their heart, and you just communicate over that cord back and forth. It's a very, very cool feeling.
Looking across decades of writing, what truth keeps resurfacing no matter how much the landscape changes?
Well, the one truth that immediately comes to mind is that there will always be evil, and we will always need brave people to go out and confront that evil head on, because evil cannot be appeased in order to be defeated. I believe that evil has to be met with strength and resolve, and that is the only thing evil understands is force. So we will always need to be able to apply force, whether it be force of arms, whether it be force of economics, whatever it may be. But no dictatorial regime has ever been overthrown by planting enough flowers in the local park near the El Presidente's palace. So that is probably one of the things that I've realized, and also understand that I'm a bit biased because I spend so much time with the people that we trust to go out and apply that force, whether it's to go out and rescue hostages, whether it's to go out and kill somebody like Soleimani that was done in Iraq with a drone strike, but we had people on the ground. There was a lot of stuff that went into that thing, whether it's going after al-Baghdadi, where a team went in to do that. I think that's probably one of the truest things that I've learned. In the other thing that I said earlier in this episode was, there is no American dream without those willing to protect it. That to me gets reinforced every single day, that we enjoy so much opportunity, so much security, and so much freedom. We take it for granted, and too many of us don't stop to reflect and to take a moment to be truly grateful for the men and women that sacrifice. It's not a joke when they say it's a blank check that says up to and including my life. That without these people doing what they're doing, we wouldn't be having a free and frank discussion on this podcast right now. The people listening would not have the comfort of knowing that they can go to work and not come home to a home that's been looted by a band of marauders and your wife and your children have been taken away. We wouldn't enjoy all these things but for those men and women who are willing to go out and do some of this nation's most dangerous business. So that is reinforced in me continuously.
Where do you think, like, you've kind of hinted, I guess, without coming out and saying it, where do you think, like, going back to your friend Jonah's example of we're standing on the tip of the mountain and the only way we can kind of blow it is, social suicide or political suicide and that stuff. All right, there's obviously a lot of turbulence, at least in the media, about this stuff, but where do you think we stand in that?
Well, I see the erosion of a lot of institutions. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. My wife is a family medicine doctor. She was involved in research in public health before. So listen, I'm not shy about saying I think it was crazy that I think it's crazy that people make health decisions based on their politics. I think we've lost so much trust in institutions and expertise that people are making decisions that might not be good for them based on their politics. And we can look at the explosion of measles in South Carolina as we're recording this. This is unbelievable. We are going to lose our status as having eradicated measles in this country very quickly. If we haven't already hit that mark, we're going to hit it very, very soon. And these are little kids that are getting measles because their parents chose not to vaccinate them. So there's a certain, that to me is a choice. People have chosen to, this whole thing about I do my own research. No, you don't. I don't do my own research. That's why I go see an expert. My plumber doesn't do my frickin' taxes, and I go to a doctor for health things because the doctor is the expert. And I know a lot of people didn't like the changing information in COVID, and there were different public health policies put in place, and some they felt were too big. And, we have the benefit of hindsight right now to look back and say what worked and what didn't work. And I had a lot of friends that were getting upset at how quickly public health things were changing, particularly during COVID. And I would say, guys, it's like getting mad at the weatherman because he changed the forecast. You get new data, you change the forecast. We live in a free country, but we also have a social compact, right? So something like measles does not work if we don't have enough herd immunity. If we don't have enough people vaccinated, then I'm vaccinated for measles. I was vaccinated for a kid. Your dad was, how old's your dad?
60.
Okay. So your dad either got measles as a kid or was vaccinated. I forget where it stopped when I know in the 80s they changed it to 2 shots instead of 1, but we get to the point where even though I'm vaccinated for measles, I could still get measles. I still could get measles. If it explodes and I'm exposed to it, I could get it again even though I'm vaccinated. And one of the things people don't realize about measles, and I'm not necessarily the spokesperson for measles, is it wipes out your entire immune system. So any immunity you have to other diseases, it's like getting in a car crash and your immune system has amnesia. So all these other things that you've worked to get healthy. So that kind of stuff where people think like George Soros, like ridiculous stuff, like he's putting nanobots in the vaccines and just, to me, it's crazy that we have the best science in the world. We have incredible advancements in technology and particularly in medicine. And now we're dismantling, we've put a lawyer that sues drug companies in charge of our health in this country. Kennedy's not a doctor. He's a lawyer. He's an environmental lawyer. And so the idea that this guy is dismantling research programs, we've had these great longitudinal studies in cancer that got shut down. Their funding got cut. You can't start those up again. So if the study was supposed to go for 50, 60 years and you cut the funding at 30 years, that's it. You've got the data to 30 years. And so that kind of stuff to me is a choice. Culturally, we've made a choice to stop investing, particularly in science and when it comes to health. And I have enough people in my life who benefit from the advances in modern medicine and health that really pisses me off. It pisses me off that we have chosen to scare away scientists. We've got scientists going to Canada, going to the UK, going to France. The Chinese have a full court press trying to recruit scientists. So the idea that an enemy nation is going to have some of the brightest minds that should be in the United States, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And, but this is what happens. We had a free and fair election. People voted, and this is what they get. This is, H.L. Mencken once said that democracy is the idea that every person knows what's good for them and they deserve to get it good and hard. So, but unfortunately, the rest of us have to get it good and hard as well. So when I see little kids whose parents don't even get them the freaking measles vaccine and they are put through some terrible, terrible pain and suffering, that pisses me off. That bothers me because it's unnecessary suffering. And I don't like that. So, and I weep for people where we might have had medical breakthroughs. Your dad is one of them. I have no idea what funding for ALS has been cut in all of this. There may have been no breakthroughs. It could have stayed exactly the way it was and nothing would have come along. But who knows? All I know is that a lot of that stuff has been scaled back, if not completely taken off the table. And I think when it comes to health and science, that's an area where we really miss out. The dollar's dropped 11% of its value, has gone down. I think when we don't obey the rule of law, what ends up happening is other countries look at us as not a safe place to put their money. And we're going to have a $40 trillion debt very soon, very, very soon. And we survive only because foreign entities are willing to buy our treasuries. And if we look like a bunch of morons who can't be trusted, who don't obey the rule of law, why would you put your money here? And so we can't live with this huge debt if we can't keep rolling over our treasuries. So there's a lot of choices we're making that to me seem like suicide, like Jonah said, suicide of the West. I think we're making choices that are not healthy, whether it be economically healthy or actually healthy. So I'll get off my soapbox there. You got an extra long answer on that one. You touched on a nerve.
No,
you grabbed the third rail with me, you two. So there you go.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because there's so much going on, and it's no longer about what's right or wrong. It's like, what does my party think? That's how I should respond.
It's tribal. It's what jersey do they have on? We don't have people that have America's interest at heart. They have what drives my base. And this is right down to members of Congress who, when they do these hearings, are looking for one viral moment that they can condense into a 30-second thing they can put up on TikTok and Instagram and fundraise off of. This is crazy. We used to have people that wanted to be parts of institutions to make our country a better place. Now people want to be parts of institutions so they can stand on top of those institutions and draw attention to themselves so that they can, we'll get going on insider trading. All these Congress people go in and they leave millionaires. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could fix if we had the stomach and the will to fix it. And maybe that'll be the good thing that comes out of this kind of period in American history, is that we double down on maturity, putting serious, mature, sober people in positions of leadership. Maybe that's what we'll realize, is that we goofed around for too long. We're lucky that it wasn't worse than it was, that the American system was as resilient as it was. But boy, we got a lot of work to do to make up our standing in the world and on the world stage. And we need to try to claw back some of the good stuff at home that we let slide because it made one party or the other happy that we did X. Even though it hurt the country in the long run, in the medium term or short term, it got our party reelected. And that's no way to run a Navy, boys.
Before we close, brag about your family for a minute and tell us what you hope they say about you when you're not around.
Well, I hope, I think as any father, any husband, what you hope is that, one, I made their lives easier. That when they had burdens, I was able to lighten them, soften them, or help give guidance on how to carry those burdens. That's one of the big things I hope. Two, I love to laugh. I hope I made them laugh. I hope that they felt safe, loved, heard, seen around me. If I've done those things, I have fulfilled my obligations as a husband and as a father. And I hope I instilled, I know my wife and I have worked very hard to instill in our children a love of country and a belief in their duty as citizens, that it is incumbent upon them, just like it's incumbent on my generation, to leave to the next generation a stronger, freer, more prosperous, more secure nation than was given to us. We don't own America. We are the caretakers of this country, and we take care of it until it is time to hand it to the next generation. So I take my duties as a citizen very, very seriously, and I hope that I have convinced my children by my example of being involved in campaigns and being involved in issues and things like that. I hope that I've taught them not only to be good human beings, good partners in life, good people, but good citizens.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid-fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
We always say when we get married, when we have our kids. So from a family standpoint, that's the happiest. From a professional standpoint, it was when the best editor at Simon & Schuster called me and said, I read your book and we want to publish you. So that's personal and professional answers there for you.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
There's been a few. Some I don't talk about publicly, as I would imagine you understand. My parents' divorce was very difficult on me as a child, so I think that may be one of the biggest things. Yeah, I mean, I've had some pretty serious things happen. That sounds, when I do it in my mind, it's small, but it's because I don't discuss. To be honest with you, some of the stuff is so personal that I don't put it out in the public sphere. So like I'm scrambling for something, not because my life has been just a bed of roses, but because the stuff that immediately comes to mind, that if it was just you and me and we were dear friends for a long time and it wasn't going anyplace else, I'd tell you. But so I'll let that one sit there. I figure that's kinder and more polite than a no comment.
What are you most excited about?
So, Cold Zero, my first co-written thriller, because I wanted to step outside my Scott Harvath books. Cold Zero is about to come out, and that is being turned into a movie, which I'm excited about, with Pete Berg. And Pete's a great director, producer, and then Nick Pizzolatto is our screenwriter. He did True Detective on HBO, and he's fantastic. So that's that. And then the Harvath books are being turned into a TV series, and the director is the John Wick director, and our writer is the writer who did all the Punisher series for Netflix. And Howard Gordon, who did HomeLand and 24, is one of our executive producers. So that I'm really excited about. Those two big Hollywood things.
Nick Pizzolatto, we actually met from the podcast. He's been on
Nick's
twice.
been on twice.
And
He's
just awesome.
He's from New Orleans, and so is my stepmom. So our families, my stepmom's brother went to college with someone from Nick's family. So it's just kind of a small world. So, and I think they moved to Lake Pontchartrain or something like that. He didn't fully grow up in New Orleans. He moved outside the city, but I love him. He's such a cool guy. That's neat that you guys have had him on.
Yeah, he's awesome. And True Detective is just
so good.
It's like, in my opinion, the best ever. I'm biased, but before I met Nick, it was my favorite show.
It's really good.
What advice would you give your younger self?
What advice would I give my younger self? Don't care what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter. 100 years from now, you'll be gone. Nobody's going to remember your name anyway. Most people are focused on themselves. And if somebody's got something to say about you, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't move the needle. Don't care. Which is important if you're in the public eye. If you're creating art and, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. So don't care what other people think.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Yeah. So we talked about Suicide of the West by Jonah Goldberg. I always listen. You guys have talked about my books the whole time. I'm not gonna throw my own books out here because I like when I get this question to promote other authors. So I think Suicide of the West, as far as nonfiction is concerned, by Jonah Goldberg, is absolutely fantastic. Don't let the title throw you. Suicide means we have a choice in what happens to America, as we discussed earlier. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous book. I am a huge fan of Ryan Holiday, who writes about Stoicism. So the obstacle is the way. The thing that is most troubling you, that is most hindering you, is often the thing which you can use to propel yourself forward. And so I'm a big fan of that. Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. If you've not had Ryan as a guest, now having been a guest on your show for the first time, I highly recommend you try to book Ryan. I think he's terrific. I think he's very cool. Have you seen anything that he's done ever?
I've listened to his stuff
Okay.
for years,
So you've
years
thought
and
about
years.
getting him as a guest.
Yeah.
I like him, so I think his stuff is great, and I'm a big proponent of stoicism. So I love Mark Greaney, The Gray Man, which is a thriller series. I'm a big Ward Larson is my co-author for Cold Zero, and Ward's thrillers are fantastic. I've been a big fan of Steve Berry and James Rollins forever. We all came up in the thriller business together, so yeah. There'll be some of the books and authors that I enjoy.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
We talked religion, politics. Unless you guys have got like an hour to talk about sex, I think we've done 2 of the 3 we're not supposed to talk about. So I think we're probably good. Maybe we should leave that one unsaid. Maybe there is something that should be left unsaid. I think we're probably pretty good.
One.
Brad, thank you for your honesty, your discipline, and the seriousness with which you approach both story and responsibility. Your work reminds us that freedom is fragile, that courage often goes unnamed, and that love of family is what gives the fight its meaning in the first place. We're grateful for your voice, your vigilance, and the way you keep faith with the truth. Thank you for joining us today, and may God bless you and your family.
Oh, thank you. And may God bless you both and your families as well. This was an honor. I have to say, I do a lot of interviews. These were freaking great questions. They really were. It's a big deal when you do it sounds like a humble brag, but I do a lot of media. And the best is when the questions are so thoughtful and so well posed. And so the time flew by, and I just want to thank you guys for you obviously spend a lot of time prepping to do this. So just as somebody on this end of the interview, I just want to say thank you. It means a lot to me that you take this so seriously, and you are such pros and you do such a great job. So thank you for this. This was a joy to do.
Yeah, that was great having you on. I'm going to sneak one last question in though, Brad. Real last question, then we'll go home here. At the end of every podcast, we ask all our guests, who are a couple of people that you know personally that you recommend we have on the podcast?
So that I know personally that I would recommend you have on the podcast. I think have you ever had Gary Sinise?
Nope.
All right. I think Gary Sinise would be fantastic for your podcast. I'd highly recommend Gary Sinise. I think he's great. I would also recommend the former Secretary of Energy and the longest serving governor in Texas, Rick Perry. I think Rick would be a fantastic guest for you guys. He's terrific. And I'm trying to think who else. Those are the top 2 that jump to mind right now. I'm trying to think if I have like a real kind of dark horse, like a Hollywood person. You know what I mean? Sinise kind of straddles that line since he's an actor and all that kind of stuff. But those would be the 2. I think Gary Sinise or Rick Perry would be fascinating guests. They're both extremely well read. They're very well spoken. They're very deep, interesting men. I would recommend both of them to you. And please use my name. Tell them I said hello if you reach out to them. Say, Brad Thor suggested we contact you.
We will for sure. Thanks so much for coming on today.